Call order, school board charge meeting. First item is for self-evaluation, review and discussion. I sent it out on Friday. Hope you all had a chance to at least read through it once. Initial thoughts, questions from anyone? Or do we want to just go through each one?
That sounds good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That sounds good. Most of them, I feel like our rankings were pretty close. There were only a couple that were spread out. Most of them were pretty like-minded, I think. First one. Around leadership, mission, values, and goals. Board annually reviews the district's vision and mission statement, and annually adopts board goals which support district vision and mission. Three of us rated it good, and one person said acceptable. The comments were similar. There was one who said the longer we work together, we're getting better at this, and another, we had established a practice of having written goals, and we are aware of it now. I think the next step is to move the needle from acceptable good as to making sure we debrief an honest assessment in June or July about those goals. So, thoughts, anyone? And I think that makes sense. It's each summer to kind of talk over what our goals were and how we feel we did on those goals before we set the goals for next year. I can just breathe. You guys already do. I'll just stop me if anybody has questions.
I
Second.
want to read through it, or is the discussion gonna happen around goals? I just want to keep the goals.
Yeah, I mean, I read it. No questions then? No. Okay. All right.
You good with that, Stephen?
Okay. So goals for the year. I guess, does anybody have any goals? I mean, we saw the few paragraphs at the bottom. Does anybody have one or two they're really passionate about that they want to see for next year, I guess? Or what are your top ones? Things you're gonna focus on next year?
Right. For me, it would be hard to take the first goal of last year off for this year. I don't know what to change. But I might change one thing, that to me still feels like principal, primary, that's why we're here. Without searching for something that's different, that's where I would.
The first goal.
I don't know, if you said, I don't have it written in front of me, and where they get on.
Pleasant Hill School District will strengthen literacy across all grades level by increasing percentage of students who meet or exceed grade level expectations while ensuring timely and effective supports through multi-tiered system of support for students who need additional help. Progress will be measured by growth on district and state literacy assessments, the percentage of students meeting benchmark targets, and documented intervention outcomes at tiers 2 and 3. And it feels to me like there's not one of those things that wouldn't be a goal issue too. And I go a little step further in saying, no, I'll probably.
Could you read the part again? It says how we're gonna monitor that.
3 ways: growth on district and state literacy assessments,
District.
percentage of students meeting benchmark targets, and documented intervention outcomes.
I was just ensuring that we were, that it was including our STAR assessment information. That's included in the district measurement, so.
And I think, in order to support that goal, I think that with a heavy guidance from Jim, decide what we want in those fall, winter, spring, scorecard reports. I've talked to 2 of the admins and they're happy to do, you know, present whatever numbers we want. They're just not really sure what it is we want and just kind of fire your hip a little bit. And our initial feedback was, oh, too much. And then, which then in the spring, we didn't do a good job of communicating what too much meant back to them. And so then in the spring, it led to asking questions that they're like, "Hmm." And so I think if we can, I'm not trying to get out of meetings any quicker than we do, but to have a, this is what's expected from the board in the presentation, knowing they're gonna have multiple other points of data that we're not going to necessarily ask to see every time. Would help our monitoring and streamline their process for us.
Besides these 3 measurements, I'm trying to remember what else they reported in the 3,
The Pearsall's data for the counseling.
which that's in here. I think that's the documented intervention outcomes for tier 2 and 3, right? Not really.
It stated that they can use or information they can use in drilling down deeper to a particular student. As far as whether or not if a student comes up through their thesis process, are they also experiencing mental health issues where they may need counseling? And that might be, it might be an indicator. Yes, they've actually worked, referenced them as far as Pearsall said, actually an on-site counselor. It can also be used for school-wide to go see on the dashboard how much in a particular month or maybe the previous month is being searched for. So for instance, if we're seeing an uptick in people searching for suicidal awareness, then counselors might use that for school-wide information.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I just was thinking the intervention was about that stuff, but it's not. It's yes. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, and then there's. Thanks for the reminder on microphone. The like attendance and behaviors.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Learner profile alignment.
Yep.
So the additional parts of the scorecard is getting at, I'll use a sports analogy. Through our evaluation process with regard to the state is that teachers will set teachers who have students or classes that will take an actual state assessment. Not all teachers. All teachers will set 3 goals. 2 student learning growth goals. So they want to see what was the simple example is say you give a pre-test, we want this, based by demographics, we want to see our students increase a certain amount for the post-test. if they give a statewide assessment, then at least one of those two goals has to be based on the statewide assessment. And then they have to provide a professional learning, protocol as well. And so that's something that they want to practice, or they want to do something with their team. So we have that level of evaluation that's going on with the teachers and staff. My take on that is, it's a good practice to know and want our teachers to drill down and understanding that data and moving that data. As far as the statewide assessment goes, once they generally said that, that goal generally goes away. So you may start going into a sporting contest and you say, well, I want to beat this team in a basketball game 86-54. Once you get going in the game, the idea that goes away, and you hope that you practiced different offenses for man-to-man defense, zone defense. You've got different inbound plays. You've got all of the aspects of the game covered. In the end of the game, and you have the result that maybe you would expect to have. And so the scorecard piece to me is like that in terms of what are the details that we need to take care of day to day or month to month or throughout the entire year that will get us the results that we want. And some of that I think is the disconnect that where, you know, Alan and Brennan may really understand why it is that we're asking teachers to go through professional development modeling and starting to show that they are understanding the criteria that's being set, the objectives that are being set for a particular learning unit within a classroom. And that's what they are trying to increase. So that when a kid comes into this, or students comes into the classroom, they can say to student terms, today my expectation is when I'm done, I should know X, I should know Y. So that by the time we get to the end of the unit or end of the year, that is actually showing itself through increased assessment or increased data. But that is what the scorecards this year, that's what they were measuring. And say minute details, but important details, that they're really not easy to report on either. Because you go from a building where the baseline data is almost zero. And by the end of the year, as Jeff Allen was talking about, there's a few teachers that you see examples of that happening, and then next year there'll be a few more. I think they would like to see a simplification of the scorecard as well, but at the same time, we talked to them, they like the first row of the scorecard because it does have some reporting teeth to it, in the sense of this is what we are telling the staff that we need to do to improve our educational outcomes, and now we're reporting on it to meeting with the school board. And so it does give some teeth to it, some important stuff.
And those that resist that, they would rather do what?
I don't think they have an answer. Yeah, there's usually, there's in general, there's a lot of questions of why are we doing this? And they're looking for the administrator to give them, and a silver bullet answer that nobody could possibly disagree with. You can sit down and go through the same processes that we've gone through here. We talk about the happy effect. We talk about the individual pieces is what teacher action or what action has the greatest impact as far as student achievement goes, and the effect size of those. So we even go through and talk about learning appropriation of the teacher as an example. And I think it's the kind of built in human nature of when you get in the heart of a classroom and you've got an interruption and you've got a sick kid and you've got a group of kids leaving on a field trip, you kind of fall back to, let's see, old habits, fall back to what's easy. You make it through that day and you come back the next day.
Changes are.
It changes hard, and your work that they're doing is extremely. We sometimes talk about it in terms of that it can, not in terms of, we sometimes talk about it in ways in which it becomes oversimplified as far as a baseline understanding of what's going on in their classroom. But it's terribly complex and trying to put together a school system supporting everything that's going on from, especially this spring, we saw a ton. So we're doing a lot more work around our own local assessment. And so we've got the dates and times that are set out for that. Our elementary school clearly has gone through this before, so they understand whose responsibility is what they do as far as makeups when the students aren't there on a particular day when you're taking the assessment. How does that happen? And that, all of those things have been ironed out over time. It's brand new to the secondary school. So the idea of a teacher we're going to do is, okay, we decided that May 16th was the day in which this was, the English language arts test was going to begin. So they gave the test on that day. Well, on that day, our egg building or they might have been out on a field trip. We might have had choir doing a practice. The band might have been off at a competition. And from that, then we only got 50% of the kids tested. From that teacher's point of view, because they had gone through it before, was, well, I'm done. I did the test. And from everyone else's point of view, is no, you're not done yet. You still have to do your students took the test. Well, isn't that the responsibility of seven? Well, no, it's not. Seven can help. As time permits, it'll come in full kids, Alan can full kids, or EAs can full kids to do that. But ultimately, we need the full responsibility of making sure that go back on the classroom teacher and then communicate what the supposed to look like, and then we develop what that system is like for that good. So those are some of the, again, growing pains in the, I hate to call it resistance to change. Some of it is resistance to change. Here. Some of that wondering why I gotta do that work, like we sit down and say we need to develop a unit plan. Some of that unit planning is specific to Division 22 compliance standards that we've got to have in place for the current things. It says, I would like to see the curriculum for this class, I would see the units of this class when it's being taught. We'll provide that to them for a classroom teacher. That is a compliance issue that's I don't really want to throw on them because it is paperwork in a sense, but it also is an important sense of paperwork because that unit should be directly aligned with the curriculum to the standards, the core standards that the state is adopting, that says we need to be teaching to. That also then helps us, once we're applying, see where our holes are and find out if we're not seeing achievements in a particular area. And we can start to investigate and find out, well, the unit of measure that we're using, or the standards that we're using, the curriculum that we purchased is sitting on the shelf, and we're doing novel studies, and the teacher can't demonstrate that they are actually aligned with the standards that we're actually testing with the state test. And clearly, if there's not alignment there, if the students don't understand or haven't been taught the difference in maybe making inferences in text, they're not likely to do very well on assessment. That was a lot.
Well, so going back to this, these three things, from your perspective, are those in any way unreasonable, unachievable, not measurable? And again, it's complicated, but
Yeah.
what I'm wondering is, okay, I hear you. What do we do about that here?
And I think as far as I think that first one is a good goal, because if we're coming back and we're thinking about things that we are investing in, the times that we're investing in, that will help align as far as the work that we're doing here. And the more that we talk about that in a modeling sense, the more that will be paid attention to. There are so many things that come across my desk that you guys will generally never see, because it's for lack of better, it's kind of just garbage. It does not align or achieve. It could be before legislation. I've got the board update as far as the equity committee stuff. You know, the equity committee went from a board committee, and then they realized, oh, there's nobody that's actually going to participate on the equity committee because they don't want to go in and have their committee recorded And they're talking about really sensitive issues that they're seeing within their communities. And so we report back to the legislature that this is what's happening, what we're seeing in our schools, in our districts, and trying to fill this committee. And so then they changed the legislation and said, okay, it's no longer a board or committee, it's now a superintendent committee. And other pieces that go along with that that just aren't fully aligned. I don't want to say important because it is important work, but it's not fully aligned to the achievement of the work that we are doing right now. It may be sometime in the future. But if we took every single one of those and just continued to land it on our plates, we become really overwhelmed and are same thing within our schools. How much do we keep out with the classrooms and student benefit? The things that we talk about and set as priorities, they definitely go through it.
So you're going to see a change in those quarterly reports. To more aligned with the things that we're monitoring there.
The change in the reports.
The admin staff, the scorecards.
I think it would just be better communication on our part and more clear to them if we say, these are the 10 data points we want to see, what are
Mhm.
but I know it's important to me, but to basically have it outlined, this is the outline of your presentation, all our spring. And if they want to add other things, that's fine, but so that we get what we need and they're functioning best. They know they're doing the right thing.
Sure. So do you want Jim to propose something for that, or do you want us? Or,
Where did for year one, and looking at the reading data and local assessment data can be very difficult. Because what does it mean to be a reader? I think and that becomes a very difficult, assessment because of what goes into being a reader between being able to blend and actually read pages read words on a page fluently. And we usually do that by the rate in which the student does that. The rate in which it does it tells us that the brain is operating in a way that it's fluent, that it's not having to work hard to still kind of stand out and put letters together that I can recognize and know I've seen this before. I know what the sound makes. The next thing that's happening behind that is then, what do the words mean when they put together kind of contextually? Some of that then requires just the amount of time in which a student reads and understands and is subjected to reading. So they have background knowledge. And that's so that when two people read the same text, if they have the same background knowledge, then they're gonna have the same use on the text. So out of that, then you're talking about comprehension, and you're talking about vocabulary. We have different assessments for every one of those things that then can go into a composite score, which we share some of those composite scores. The other piece on there is the OSAS. The problem with the OSAS is, while I have some of that data now, that data is embargoed and we don't see it until it's supposed to be the end of October, but generally comes about November time. And so our evaluation cycles are off in terms of, when we test, how we set goals and we get that information back. Question might be after year one of our STAR assessments, and then we will get the OSAS data later, in October, beginning of November. Did you guys feel that you got a good beginning of your middle year and end of year idea of what was happening with our reading and the reading assessment? Not to say you can go back and say, oh yeah, I felt like we were making adequate growth, but I'm now starting to see the cycle in which this is provided, what is happening between the start of the year, we do like a pre-assessment, the middle of the year, what happens with the assessment of my students sometimes go out of the blue, or in the blue, or out of the yellow, and in the red, and then what happens at the end of the year.
Yeah, I mean, I spent enough time in the building to understand, but then also just my own kids' conferences, they're very good at explaining, you know, how the benchmark moves through the year
And the elementary is really pretty easy because that is the model that we've had for so many years. Middle school is new for us. It's not new for the rest of the county, the rest of the country as far as testing and providing data, but it's new for us. And now we have results that we take to high school as well. So that's all our high school students.
So help me understand a little bit better. That now makes a ton of sense, and yet from the state's perspective, I'm not saying that's anything that's important, but they're just saying 29 or 50% now, right? But these kids have to be, well, actually, the kids have to be 50% proficient. And all that other stuff that you're talking about, that's not the measurement.
No.
And so where the tension is, I mean, you got, seems like there's three things we're trying to figure out how to navigate, and as a board, trying to decide whether we're doing our job and the school's doing theirs. Everything you just described is a kid actually learning how to read. What I keep saying over and over again is practically speaking, out in the real world, you find out real quick when they get to your job and they try to read their application, if they know how to read or not. So do they know how to read or don't they know how to read? And you're describing different ways in which that's gonna happen. But when it comes to the state requirement, they're just asking, are you 50% of the goal already?
Based on criteria reference tests that's been developed based on the standards that have been set.
Right.
Yeah. As you even brought up another one, is you even described something that in terms like technical reading. So it's difference between setting up a novel or a book out of a library and now actually having a technical document to read and understand.
Yes, right. Yeah, you're right.
but only the star data is real time.
So say that again.
Only the star data is real time. They take the test in October, and our October meeting, that data is presented.
Yeah.
Whereas, so as far as progress monitoring, OSS is kind of useless.
Yes, very useless as far as.
Right, well, that's where I was kind of going.
Yeah,
You know, it's like, fun.
yeah, like, yes, we need to pay attention to it, yes. We need to, whether that's from a legislative point, or we need to achieve there also, but it's so far off, the data is so far behind that we can't look at OSAS on a quarterly schedule and say, you know, have somebody present numbers they're not proud of, and for us to be able to say, okay, what can we do for you? What tools can we provide? What, that we can actually add in and us can actually respond to something. So like, if we're talking about scorecard, I think the important part is like, there's a million pieces that go into that composite score, and that feels too granular for me. I think the composite score for every grade in which we get star, you know, this many first graders are red, this many are yellow, blue, green, and then we watch what those numbers do as we progress through the year. And then it would be great when the whatever scorecard report aligns with the release of the OSAS data to, because there was supposed to be that, the tie-in, right? the kind of predicts how you're gonna do on the state test, it would be great to look at last year's numbers with our actual outcomes. And, I mean, I'm sure Stephanie's gonna look at that and she will know the exact correlation, but that would be good to look at as well.
That's good, because the distinctions between our local assessment and the OSAS, is a lot of what you just said, Jen. We've got able to drill down specifically into a student and actually group particular students that need, additional time reading or might need even additional time on a particular skill around blending. Or maybe additional time on a particular blending, like they may not be getting SH, where they might already have CH, you know. Those assessments can help us with that, plus they can tell us how are our systems working. So if we're consistently seeing at the end of the second year, our second graders are declining, like we're not getting enough students moving in the right color directions. How can we adjust to that? What can we try to make that better? The OSAS really needs to be looked at. It's hard to not look at it when you see, you know, like 14% of your students pass OSAS. It needs to be a systems check. What is happening within our system as to why these numbers are this low in maybe in comparison schools. And that is a lot of what we've been focused on. And it's a lot of what our strategic document is built around is what does the handoff look like for our students, particularly our students who might be identified as special education services. What do our services look like in the students in general education classroom? Are our general ed teachers and our SPED teachers actually working in developing specially designed instruction? Or do our students go to a regular classroom and get a handout and then take that to the SPED classroom and actually are never involved with their state peers? Therefore, they never have a modeling of learning in a standard in which we're expecting to be assessed at.
How do we, what does it say about our system or our state system if we're making great progress in STAR and going nowhere with OSAS?
Okay, we have to, I guess, know more about what is happening. And so culturally, 4 years ago, I can say, coming in, is we had a culture of opting out. And somewhere within our culture, it was being encouraged and talked about. And I would say in many ways, probably not in compliance with what the state was requiring us to be in compliance of. From that, I think up to this next year now having like an instructional coach where Stephanie also takes care of our assessment calendar. And we've tried to fix this along the way by putting more emphasis in our administrators in being able to train and hold accountability. And in the first year of doing that, then we had an entire 11th grade class that did not test math as an example. There was a mistake because they gave the interim assessment versus the actual assessment. And then now having Stephanie in where we've got a testing calendar, that calendar has already gone out to administrators, so they share it with the staff as well. They can hold time accountable, or space accountable during the year. The teachers know that ahead of time. We improved greatly the amount of students that actually we tested this last year. And we say we'd be really close to actually meeting our 95% mark. As well as very few opt-outs. We track the opt-outs much cleaner than we ever have in the past. And in addition to the STAR assessment, building a culture of some of this is important. It might not be important to you or your job, but it is important to you and your job. And therefore, we're going to come together as a team. And we're going to do the best that we actually can. And we're going to send that message to our students that, yes, I may not like this, but I'm still going to do my best for the greater good of the organization, providing good data. That's really kind of think where we're at right now. Our assessment is still not great as far as the scores that are coming in, but we are seeing, I think we're going to be positive in the sense that we're seeing shifts in the amount of kids that we're testing, staff taking it more seriously. There's still pockets where it's not taken seriously. That is then, trickles down to the students, where students don't take it seriously, just click through it. So trying to build the importance around the test as well. But also have to understand that, it is a long, how do my own kids explain this? They did not feel the state assessment was that difficult to pass. It took a great amount of focus that they were not interested in. It's not what they want to focus on. The differentiation between the two. OSAS has to look at is the systems, what's happening with their systems, so we can fix our systems. The STAR can also be a systems piece as well. It's really down to actually how our kids are doing, as far as getting the skills to learn how to read. So I think the answer as far as the goal is that I think the goal was, I think you're right, well written, and if that's one you guys want to continue with, I believe that we have the structure in place to continue with that and have a feedback mechanism returned here.
The other comments? It makes sense, I think, having, I don't know. The blue, yellow, green, and I think it'd be good to get trending if we can, as we get more quarters. We get the quarters all on the same slide, so you can see how they change over time, we could reach age or area.
And you're talking about trending between fall, winter, and spring.
And like continue that, not just like each year, but like one graph. After 3 years of having this, you have one graph that's got 12 bars.
Even though it would be a
Right.
different set of kids.
Well, I mean, ideally, what I'd love to see is you track one cohort. Like, you have the second graders, 3 years,
Oh,
and then you have the third grade right next to it, and you see how that changes as they continue. Cause you might have one grade that's really good and one grade that's not as good, and if you're just looking at second grade over time, it's gonna bounce around and not really mean anything. But if you track a cohort, you can see, are they all improving? Are they all getting worse? They all staying the same? Is nothing happening? I think that would be give you the most relevant information, I feel like.
Let's definitely look at that. It would probably start third grade. Just
Sure.
for K-1, 2, so
Right.
university test versus, okay. Or we might even do a K-1, 2, and then 3.
I mean, I'll leave that to you to figure out, but that's just, I don't need to say the weeds.
It's an area that I've attempted to do many times. It is actually the area in which, from my own perspective, second grade was always the difficult class, that when you got to the winter benchmarking, we had this huge drop. And so being able to work with the individual doctoral students who made the test and understanding what was happening, why all of a sudden, every single year that I had this second grade, different group of kids, but it just changed. What was happening as far as the testing development that was causing that. Especially after I made some staffing shifts and knew that it wasn't necessarily poor teaching.
What was the answer?
The test got significantly more difficult, so there was a big jump in the amount of reading, the difficulty in the reading that second graders were expected to do at their winter benchmark was one of them, yes. And we ended up shifting and putting more resources to second grade, to make the groups a little smaller. More consistent. And that's why I go back to the idea of the work that the teachers do. And why I think the work that Stephanie does is really important as well. Is you will get into this data where you'll have a student meeting benchmark or maybe even exceeding benchmark, for instance, on their rate of reading, their fluency. So they'll be reading 140, 150 words per minute at fourth grade, and then you go and you give them a comprehension test and they cannot tell you what they read. So every indicator says this student is reading and they should understand what they're reading. And that usually is a sign that there's something not connecting. There's either disability, there's more we have to do as far as the comprehension goes. We don't even have a clear answer today, but it usually requires pretty high dosage tutoring for those students, and that's fine.
Question? No? We keep that same goal then. Secondary goal or second goal, you want to have the strong thoughts?
I think a lot of the things, even the things that are listed in this bottom paragraph are, I don't know if they were worthy of a year-long goal. They feel kind of practical checkups. But I think, and Jim was working on getting something together, but, being able to, I don't know, it's talked to ODE about the things that Rusty was bringing up in the spring, or if it's bypass the ODE and build our representative relationships. I'm not sure what the best way to go about that is, but I think getting, it sounds like we did a lot better on opt-outs this year, but doing things that are going to make meeting the state benchmarks and keeping ourselves out of their tier support is a pretty big deal.
So I did reach out to OSBA, Kristen Miles, and then our new Lane ESD superintendent, Tanel, is a former assistant superintendent with the Department of Ed in one of their areas. She passed my email on to the state superintendent, and then Eric Anderson, who is the assistant superintendent of Lane ESD, is now with OD. Neither one of them has gotten back to me, which is not surprising. OSBA is always open to do training. Kristen says that they will not look it into the state's side of things, that they'll keep it more governance related as far as their piece of it. I don't foresee without a larger OSBA push, whether it's from our county, I don't see ODE putting together something specifically for us to come down. It took me a long time and lots of pressure to get their explanation of how it is that they developed the cut scores for the state assessment as it was. And even that, once I shared that with Maddie Aaron from Lane ESD, she recognized it as just a copy and paste from the previous email that their statistician, who is now works for Eugene Forte, but she just grabbed some of his text and put it in the email for me. One of the things that the accountability, and this is where OSB may be able to come in and talk and answer more questions about the accountability. But if you remember when we set the strategic objectives, at that point in time, we had to also adopt long-term, the longitudinal targets. At that point in time, I'll give you an idea of what that meeting was like. So when everything came out to begin with, it was worded in a way of districts go ahead and set your longitudinal targets, and then we'll have this collaboration meeting, almost kind of if needed. That turned into, no, we were gonna have this collaborative process, so it really didn't matter what we said as our targets, but we had to sit down with two members from the Department of Ed, one who had prior administrative experience, and then sent by an individual who was more of a statistician, the individual and understood what was adequate growth as measured through a statistician's eyes. That meeting was very quickly got to the point of, listen, if ODE already has this idea of what it is that we should be doing, why don't we just set the targets for us, whether we go back and forth deciding what's appropriate or not appropriate. The statistician broke into that conversation at this point in time. In my conversation here, I think a lot of the superintendents here in the county. And then put it as a statistician type of lens as far as what we see on the typical growth, like it might be 1.5% growth over the course of a year or 2 years. And then from that, we quickly set some longitudinal targets. Now with the accountability bill, and they've added, for instance, the math and the ability to do local assessments on there. Well, and at that point in time as well, we asked the question, shortly after when the accountability was going through, can we go back through and set our targets now that we know that the targets that you made set actually have an accountability to them, meaning if we don't meet them, then you're gonna come in and take 20% of our budget. The answer was no, you can't change them. That quickly changed to, oh yes, we're actually gonna reset the targets again. And so we're in the process of now resetting the targets again. So there's kind of this consistently moving target. So that's also another example of these things that are happening out there that just don't matter. They have nothing to do with our achievement as far as what we're doing in the district. That I never bring up, but I guess we have opportunities like this. So that's happening behind the scenes as well. From that, in terms of, I think there might be some room here, I guess, for a work session to dig deeper into the accountability bill. And what that actually means that once we actually have our longitudinal targets met, I think I'd leave it up to you guys as far as how deeply you want to get into some of that.
Would they have more, would it be a little more in their vein to do a work session on, like, working with our representatives in the legislative side? Would that be more OSBA's bag?
It would be, I believe that they would, I reached out to Kristen, because Kristen is gonna be more of a training, I believe they would probably point us towards our regional meetings, so the one that we've done, I know Stephen and I have done the last 2 years, the regional one. I don't know if anyone else has done. But that's up for all of us to be able to go to and meet with the regional one. That's generally somewhat of a canned presentation, but then they also have, we'll work together in groups and answer questions and then provide feedback for them. So they're getting feedback as far as, what does each of the regions want their legislative push to be. That's another area we're checking out. Yeah. And that's why I gave you the example of, I think, the upward advocacy that's became a board goal back when Nancy Golden was superintendent in Springfield. The board at that point in time did not want to wait and see what was happening to them. They wanted to be the advocates that push things up. From there, at that point in time, that board started sending representatives back to Washington, D.C. that meet with lobbyists. There was actually some money that they actually got earmarked specifically to Springfield School District back at the time, legislation. They learned to kind of start to play the game a little bit. So there's space there, I guess, as well. It fits, with self-assessment categories, right, leadership and policy guidance as far as what does and not advocacy look like, what kind of things do we want to take back to OSBA, or the meetings or the regional meetings that we need to be going to be able to do that. Who's going to provide that? Yeah, we've got the agenda set up so that we will revisit all of this on August 24th as well.
Sure.
Okay.
So. Do we have like a specific goal for our position or around that? Or or is that something we just need to be focused on, not necessarily?
Be smarter, right?
I think without a, for me, without a written goal that I'm going to have to hold ourselves accountable to at the end of the year. This is absolutely not my strength, and it's intimidating, and it's very big. And so if I'm not gonna have to hold my feet to the fire and hold ourselves accountable at this time next year, I'm probably not gonna do it.
From a policy, policy setting, from a viewpoint of the work that goes into how do you get agenda items on, or how do you get things noticed? And this is a bad example, I think, but my own take as far as what has happened in the last 10 years is we have been over legislated. And when I think of policy development, you generally are setting up policy because there's something wrong and you want to make it better. You're not fixing it, but you're making it better. And over time, that policy will change or evolve as the systems around it kind of change. And we'll either keep up with it, or you'll see things in the initial go around of the policy that maybe didn't go so well as what you thought. There's some unintended consequences, and you have some policy changes and kind of makes it better going forward. I feel like in the last 10 years, there have been ideas brought forward just for the sense of I'm now elected, therefore I must do something. And this sounds good, and so let's create a bill, and you get the right people behind the bill, and they approve it. And it doesn't ever it affects everything that's going to happen. So somehow like an advocacy of getting the legislators to look at the work that they are doing, and how that actually affects schools. Sometimes that's through work sessions or work groups. And so our two main are COSA. COSA is the administrative group that I belong to, and OSBA is the main group that you guys belong to. Their two leaders right now work extremely well together. They are very well aligned on what it is that they are going after, what things that they, and what the message is, so that then when they go into the room and they get time to sit down with the governor, they know exactly what the message is, and they stick to that message, and they work on getting that message out over and over again so that we can stay on message with that. Some of that has effects as far as what the governor is doing. One of those items was the time, the instructional time piece that you saw come through really quickly. They were able to get in front of the governor and explain what some of the issues were with the direction that they were going. And so, while it didn't take it away, it did change in which, the way in which she ended up approaching it. So I go back to, I think that is the idea of, if there are particular issues with education that you are seeing as a board member that makes your role difficult, or that makes managing a school district from a policy sense difficult, being able to do that through an advocacy goal. In this year, we want to make sure and have a presence at our regional meeting. You know, we can identify what those things are, the OSBA convention. We want to make sure that we are in touch with those individuals through OSB or COSA to be able to identify what those issues are, and have a voice in pushing those things up. And that's how I would go about thinking about that goal. And so you also have to be very, very careful, because if you find something that is relevant to Pleasant Hill, or an example that's relevant to Pleasant Hill, and it takes hold, you may be called to testify in front of a legislature, and there are oftentimes when those stories are no longer true. And so I'm